On her 17th birthday, the black obese girl was sold to a cowboy to pay off debt. The merchant announced as the trembling girl stood in the dusty street, watching the giant cowboy dismount his horse. The townsfolk whispered cruel remarks about her weight and dark skin, placing bets on how long she'd survive doing ranch work. They saw her as nothing more than a worthless burden, destined to disappear into servitude and be forgotten forever. But when the weathered cowboy examined the legal papers with unusual care, asking pointed questions about her parentage that made the merchant sweat nervously, something shifted. This cowboy carried secrets that could either damn her to a fate worse than slavery or unlock a truth that would shake the very foundations of their small frontier town. Would this transaction seal her doom, or reveal a destiny no one could have imagined? Ada Pierce pressed her back against the wooden post outside Harwick's general store, trying to make herself invisible. The morning sun beat down on Riverton's dusty Main Street as townsfolk gathered like vultures sensing death. She knew what today meant. Her 17th birthday had arrived like a death sentence. 5 years ago, Samuel Harwick had taken her in after her parents died. He called it charity. Ada called it slavery. She scrubbed his floors, cooked his meals, and endured his constant reminders that she was nothing but a burden. A fat, worthless mouth to feed who should be grateful for his generosity. Now even that twisted mercy had run out. Harwick stumbled from his store, reeking of whiskey and desperation. His gambling debts had grown like weeds after summer rain. The creditors had stopped accepting promises. They wanted payment in flesh and bone. Ada had learned to read by stealing glances at discarded newspapers. She taught herself numbers by watching Harwick's fumbling bookkeeping. But intelligence meant nothing when you wore dark skin in a world that valued neither. The townspeople saw her as livestock, something to be bought, sold, or discarded when inconvenient. Mrs. Henderson pointed at Ada while whispering to her neighbor. The blacksmith's wife laughed behind her hand. 3 cowboys from the saloon made crude jokes about her size. Ada kept her eyes on the ground, swallowing their cruelty like bitter medicine. Harwick cleared his throat and raised his voice. "Ladies and gentlemen, today we settle accounts. This girl here will work off what I owe. Any rancher willing to take her earns my debt forgiveness." The crowd murmured with cruel amusement. Old Pete, who worked odd jobs around town, shook his head sadly. Most others seemed entertained by the spectacle. Ada felt their stares like brands against her skin. "How long you think she'll last mucking stalls?" someone called out. "Might eat more than she's worth," another voice added. Ada clenched her fists. She had survived 5 years of Harwick's abuse by staying quiet and invisible, but something inside her refused to break completely. She lifted her chin slightly, meeting a few stares with steady eyes. The sound of approaching hooves cut through the crowd's chatter. 2 riders appeared at the end of Main Street, moving with purpose rather than haste. The first man sat tall in his saddle despite his weathered appearance. His clothes were clean but worn, his hat pulled low against the sun. Something about his posture suggested both strength and gentleness. His companion was younger, dressed like a businessman despite the frontier setting. He carried a leather satchel and notebook, scanning the crowd with calculating eyes. Both men dismounted with practiced ease. The older cowboy's boots hit the dust with authority. When he removed his hat, Ada saw kind eyes set in a face carved by years of outdoor work. Gray streaked his dark hair, but his movements remained strong and sure. Harwick stepped forward with forced confidence. "You gentlemen hear about the arrangement." The weathered cowboy nodded slowly. His gaze found Ada, studying her face with unexpected intensity. She felt exposed under his scrutiny but not diminished. He looked at her like she was a person, not property. "You got the papers?" the cowboy asked. Harwick produced a crumpled document from his vest pocket. The cowboy's companion moved closer, examining the writing with professional attention. He frowned, pointing at specific lines. The 2 men exchanged meaningful glances. "This says she's 17 today," the businessman asked. "That's right. Born September 15, 1870. Ada watched the cowboys' faces change. The older man's jaw tightened. His companion made notes in his book with sudden urgency. Something had shifted in the air like the pressure before a storm. "What about her parents?" the weathered cowboy pressed. "Their names?" Harwick shifted nervously. "Dead, been taking care of her out of Christian kindness. I asked for their names. Lily Pierce and—" Harwick hesitated. "Some drifter, doesn't matter now." The cowboy's eyes hardened. He studied the document again, then looked directly at Ada. She saw recognition flicker across his features, followed by something that looked like guilt and determination mixed together. "You got any other papers? Birth certificate? Anything official? What's it matter, you taking her or not?" The businessman whispered urgently to his partner. Ada couldn't hear the words, but their meaning felt enormous. The crowd sensed tension building, pressing closer with hungry curiosity. The weathered cowboy folded the document carefully and tucked it into his shirt pocket. When he looked at Ada again, his expression held secrets that could reshape her entire world. "Yeah," he said quietly, "I'll take her." If you are enjoying this story of how one cowboy's shocking decision will change Ada's life forever, don't forget to comment where you are tuning in from to show how this story can connect us across any distances, backgrounds, and hearts. Because what will happen in the next 15 minutes in this dusty frontier town will completely transform everything Ada thought she knew about herself. The weathered cowboy helped Ada onto the wagon seat beside him. His touch was gentle, respectful, nothing like the rough handling she expected. His companion climbed into the back, still studying papers with intense focus. "Name's Gideon Creed," the cowboy said as they rolled away from town. "This here's Marcus Webb." Ada nodded but stayed silent. Trust felt dangerous after years of betrayal. The wagon creaked along dusty trails for miles. Rolling hills stretched toward distant mountains. Ada had never traveled beyond Riverton's borders. The vastness felt both terrifying and liberating. Marcus suddenly straightened in the wagon bed. "Gideon, look at this date again." Gideon pulled the horses to a stop. Marcus handed him another document from his satchel. Official seals and elaborate handwriting covered the page. Ada glimpsed legal language she couldn't fully understand. "September 15th, Marcus read aloud. "Same birthday, same year." Gideon's knuckles whitened as he gripped the reins. His face went pale beneath his weathered tan. "Sweet Lord," he whispered. "What's happening?" Ada finally spoke. Gideon turned to face her fully. His eyes held a mixture of joy and sorrow that made her stomach flutter. "Ada, what was your mother's full name?" "Lily Pierce." "Why does that matter?" "And Harwick told you your father was just some drifter." Ada nodded, confused by the intensity in his voice. Marcus leaned forward between them. "Ada, we need to tell you something that's going to sound impossible." Gideon pulled out a leather portfolio from beneath the wagon seat. Inside were official documents, land deeds, and a photograph. The picture showed a white man with kind eyes standing beside a beautiful woman with dark skin. The woman held a baby wrapped in fine linen. Ada's breath caught. The woman looked exactly like her mother. "Your father wasn't a drifter," Gideon said softly. "His name was Josiah Thornfield. He owned the biggest ranch in 3 counties. The world seemed to tilt sideways. Ada gripped the wagon seat to keep from falling. "That's impossible. Mama never mentioned any Thornfield." "She was protecting you," Marcus explained. "There were people who didn't want a mixed child inheriting prime ranch land." Gideon spread the documents across his lap. Ada saw her name written in flowing script. Legal language declared her the sole heir to 10,000 acres, cattle herds, water rights, and mineral claims. "Harwick's been stealing your mail for 5 years," Gideon continued. "Every letter from lawyers, every legal notice. He was supposed to be your guardian until you turned 17. Ada stared at the papers. The numbers seemed impossible. The wealth described could buy and sell the entire town of Riverton. "Why should I believe you?" Gideon pulled out one final document. A marriage certificate showing Josiah Thornfield and Lily Pierce wed in Denver, Colorado. The date was 18 years ago. "Your parents loved each other enough to face the whole world's hatred," he said. "Your father made me promise to find you if anything happened to them. You knew my parents. I was your father's foreman for 12 years. I held you when you were 2 days old." Tears blurred Ada's vision. Memories she thought were dreams suddenly felt real. A man with gentle hands lifting her high. A woman's laughter mixing with deeper tones. Safety and love before the world turned cruel. "Where were you when they died?" she asked. Guilt clouded Gideon's features. "Away on cattle business. Got back to find the ranch house burned and your family gone. Took me 5 years to track you down." The wagon resumed rolling toward the horizon. Ada's mind spun with impossible truths. She wasn't worthless livestock. She was an heiress. The richest person for 100 miles in any direction. "The Thornfield Ranch," Marcus said, "sits on some of the best grazing land in Wyoming territory. Your cattle operation alone generates thousands yearly." Ada touched the marriage certificate with trembling fingers. Her parents hadn't been ashamed of their love. They'd made it legal and permanent despite social pressure. "What happened to the ranch while I was gone?" "I kept it running," Gideon replied. "Saved every penny for when you came home. The account books are waiting for your review." They crested a hill as the sun reached its peak. Below them stretched an enormous valley filled with green pastures and grazing cattle. A grand ranch house sat beside a clear river, with barns and corrals spreading in all directions. "Welcome home, Miss Thornfield," Gideon said. Ada's heart hammered against her ribs. The property seemed to go on forever. Hundreds of cattle dotted the landscape. Workers moved between buildings with purposeful activity. "All of this belongs to me. Every acre, every cow, every building." A Mexican woman emerged from the ranch house as their wagon approached. Her graying hair was pulled back neatly, and her dress showed both dignity and practicality. She waited with patient curiosity. "That's Maria Santos," Gideon explained. "She's been keeping house and managing domestic affairs. Waiting for you to come home." Ada climbed down from the wagon on shaking legs. The woman studied her face carefully, then broke into a brilliant smile. "You have your mother's eyes," Maria said warmly, "and your father's stubborn chin." Ada looked back at the vast ranch spread before her. This morning she'd been a servant girl facing a lifetime of bondage. Now she stood on her own land as one of the territory's wealthiest citizens. The transformation felt too enormous to grasp, but the legal documents in Gideon's hands were real. The ranch was real. Her parents' love had been real. Everything was about to change. Maria Santos led Ada through the ranch house with pride evident in every step. Polished wood floors gleamed beneath Persian rugs. Oil paintings of Western landscapes decorated the walls. The furniture was elegant but practical, built to last generations. "Your mother picked out these curtains," Maria said, touching blue fabric that matched the Wyoming sky. "She had excellent taste." Ada ran her fingers along a mahogany dining table that could seat 20 people. Crystal glasses caught afternoon sunlight, casting rainbows across the room. This was wealth beyond anything she'd imagined. Gideon appeared in the doorway with an armload of ledger books. "Ready to see the numbers?" They spread the account books across the dining table. Ada studied columns of figures while Marcus explained the ranch's finances. Cattle sales, land leases, and investment returns created steady income streams. The total wealth made her dizzy. 10,000 acres of prime grazing land, Marcus summarized. 3,000 head of cattle, water rights to the Sweetwater River, and mineral rights to everything underneath. Ada absorbed the information with growing confidence. Numbers made sense to her. Patterns emerged from seemingly random data. Her mind organized the financial picture with surprising clarity. "The Morrison account pays late every month," she observed, pointing at the ledger. "Why do we tolerate that?" Gideon looked impressed. "Been wondering the same thing myself. And these feed costs seem high for summer grazing. You caught that quick. Most folks wouldn't notice." Ada felt something awakening inside her. Years of watching Harwick's clumsy bookkeeping had taught her to spot inefficiencies. Her mother's voice echoed in memory. teaching her to read people's hearts and intentions. A commotion outside interrupted their financial review. Horse hooves thundered into the yard. Angry voices carried through the windows. Gideon moved to peer outside, his expression darkened. Judge Clayton Morse, Sheriff Dutch Reynolds, 3 others from the Cattlemen's Association. "What do they want?" Ada asked. "To cause trouble." The men dismounted with obvious aggression. Judge Morse was a thin man with cold eyes and expensive clothes. Sheriff Reynolds looked like a bully who'd found legal authority for his cruelty. The association members were wealthy ranchers accustomed to getting their way. Maria positioned herself protectively near Ada. "They've been sniffing around since word spread about your return," she whispered. Gideon opened the front door before anyone could knock. The visitors pushed inside without invitation. "Creed," Judge Morse said curtly, "we need to discuss this situation." "What situation is that?" "Don't play stupid. You can't just install some girl and claim she owns the Thornfield spread." Ada stepped forward from behind Maria. The men's faces showed surprise, then disgust when they saw her clearly. She felt their judgment like physical blows but kept her spine straight. "I have legal documentation," she said calmly. Judge Morse laughed with ugly amusement. "Documents can be forged. Witnesses can be bought. You think anyone will believe Josiah Thornfield married a slave and left everything to their mongrel child?" The words stung, but Ada had endured worse. She gestured toward the papers spread across the dining table. "The marriage certificate is registered in Denver. The will was properly witnessed and filed. My inheritance is completely legal." Sheriff Reynolds stepped closer with obvious intimidation tactics. "Legal don't mean much out here, girl. Accidents happen to folks who don't know their place." Gideon moved between them, his hand resting casually on his gun belt. "That sounded like a threat, Sheriff. Just stating facts about ranch life." Marcus emerged from the kitchen carrying more official documents. He'd been busy while they talked. "Actually, gentlemen, Miss Thornfield's claim has federal backing. Any interference with her property rights becomes a federal crime." The association members exchanged worried glances. Federal law carried more weight than local corruption, but Judge Morse wasn't finished. "Even if the paperwork's legitimate, this ranch is too much responsibility for a child, especially one with no education or experience." Ada felt anger building in her chest. These men saw her as nothing but skin color and body shape. They couldn't imagine intelligence hiding behind appearances they despised. "Test me," she said quietly. "What? You think I'm too ignorant to run this ranch? Test my knowledge." Judge Morse's eyes lit with cruel anticipation. He clearly expected to humiliate her publicly. "Fine. What's the current market price for beef cattle in Denver?" $18 per head for prime stock, $14 for standard grade. The judge blinked, surprised by her quick answer. "How many acres can support one cow in this climate?" "Depends on rainfall, but generally 15 to 20 acres per head in good years." Sheriff Reynolds leaned forward. "What about water rights law?" Ada smiled slightly. She'd studied this carefully while reviewing the ledgers. "Prior appropriation doctrine. First in time, first in right. The Thornfield Ranch has senior water rights dating back 22 years. No downstream users can restrict our access." The men's confident expressions began wavering. Ada was answering every question correctly and quickly. Marcus pulled out a map showing oil seepage near the river. "There's also this," he said casually. The visitors crowded around the map. Dark stains marked several locations across Thornfield property. Ada felt excitement building as she realized the implications. "Oil deposits," she said. "On my land." Judge Morse's face went white. Oil meant wealth beyond cattle ranching. It meant power that could challenge the entire local establishment. Sheriff Reynolds backed toward the door. "This ain't over," he muttered. "Yes, it is," Ada replied with quiet authority. "This is my ranch, my land, my future. Anyone who wants to change that will have to follow the law." The visitors left with their tails between their legs. Ada watched them ride away, feeling strength she'd never known she possessed. 3 weeks after the confrontation, Ada woke to find 20 cattle dead near the river. Their bodies showed no signs of disease or injury. Poisoning seemed the only explanation. Gideon examined the carcasses with grim expertise. Someone put something in their water source upstream, he concluded. Ada felt cold fury building in her chest. The dead cattle represented hundreds of dollars in lost revenue. More importantly, they represented an attack on innocent animals and her workers' livelihoods. "Post guards on all the water sources," she ordered. "Double the night patrols." The ranch hands nodded with respect. Over the past weeks, Ada had earned their loyalty through fair treatment and practical decisions. She knew each man's name, his family situation, and his skills. James Lightfoot approached from the horse corrals. The young Native American had become Ada's trusted advisor on livestock matters. His knowledge of animal behavior surpassed anyone else on the ranch. "Found tracks upstream," he reported quietly. 3 riders, shod horses, came in after midnight. Ada studied the information carefully. The attack had been planned and executed with precision. This wasn't random violence but calculated sabotage. "Any chance of identifying the horses?" "Working on it. One has a distinctive chip in the left front shoe." Maria Santos hurried from the house carrying a leather portfolio. Her usually calm demeanor showed signs of strain. "These came with the morning mail," she announced, handing Ada several official-looking documents. Ada examined the papers with growing alarm. The first was a tax assessment claiming she owed thousands in back property taxes. The second questioned the validity of her parents' marriage. The third demanded an immediate survey of property boundaries. All 3 documents bore Judge Morse's official seal. Marcus appeared from the barn where he'd been reviewing shipping contracts. His business experience had proven invaluable in managing the ranch's commercial relationships. "More problems," he said, holding up a telegram. "3 of our biggest buyers are canceling fall orders. No explanation given." Ada felt the walls closing in around her. The coordinated attacks weren't coincidental. Someone was systematically trying to destroy her financially and legally. "They're hitting us from every direction," she observed. Gideon spat into the dust. "Classic intimidation tactics. Make life so miserable you'll sell cheap just to escape." "Who's behind it?" "Got to be the Cattlemen's Association. They want your land, especially with oil deposits confirmed." Ada walked to the porch railing, looking out over the vast property her parents had died protecting. The responsibility felt enormous, but surrender wasn't an option. Too many people depended on the ranch for their livelihoods. Old Pete hobbled up the road leading a lame horse. The elderly man had worked odd jobs around the territory for decades. His weathered face showed excitement despite his exhaustion. "Miss Ada," he called breathlessly, "need to talk to you private-like." They gathered in the parlor where Pete accepted a glass of water gratefully. His gnarled hands shook as he drank. "Been thinking about what you said regarding your folks," he began, "about them dying in that fire." Ada leaned forward with sudden attention. "You knew my parents, worked for your daddy couple seasons. Good man, fair wages, decent treatment." "What about the fire?" Pete's eyes darkened with memory. "Weren't no accident. I seen 3 riders leaving that night, recognized 2 of them horses." The room fell silent except for the ticking clock on the mantel. Ada's heart hammered against her ribs. "Who did you recognize?" "Judge Morse's stallion, distinctive white markings, and Sheriff Reynolds rides that big bay with the scarred shoulder." Marcus began taking notes rapidly. "You're saying they murdered the Thornfields. Can't prove murder, but they was there that night, left in a hurry when the flames got going." Ada felt pieces of a larger puzzle clicking into place. Her parents hadn't died in a random accident. They'd been killed by the same people now trying to steal her inheritance. "Why didn't you report this 5 years ago?" Pete laughed bitterly. "Report what? To who?" "Sheriff Reynolds, Judge Morse. They run this county like their personal kingdom." Gideon stood up abruptly, pacing to the window. "It makes sense now. They killed Josiah and Lily, then tried to claim the land was abandoned." When that didn't work legally, they planted Harwick to keep you hidden until you came of age. Then they'd forge documents saying you died or disappeared, Marcus added. Clear title to 10,000 acres plus oil rights. Ada felt sick to her stomach. The conspiracy had been years in the making. Her parents' deaths weren't random violence but calculated murder for profit. What about Harwick? She asked. Was he part of the original plan? Probably just a convenient drunk they could manipulate, Gideon replied. Keep you isolated and uneducated so you'd never discover your inheritance. James Lightfoot entered quietly from the kitchen. Found the chipped horseshoe. Belongs to Sheriff Reynolds' deputy. Saw him riding it this morning in town. The evidence was mounting into an undeniable pattern. Local law enforcement was actively sabotaging her ranch while covering up her parents' murder. Ada stood up with new determination. The scared servant girl was completely gone now, replaced by a woman who understood her enemy and her own power. They killed my parents for this land, she said quietly. Now they're trying to finish what they started. Maria crossed herself. What do? We fight back, but not with guns or violence. We use the law against them. Marcus looked up from his notes. How do we get justice when the local judge and sheriff are the criminals? Ada smiled grimly. We go over their heads, all the way to the territorial government if necessary. The battle for Thornfield Ranch was about to escalate beyond anything the conspirators expected. Rebecca Morrison arrived on the Tuesday stagecoach with 3 trunks and a briefcase full of legal documents. The educated suffragette from Boston had answered Ada's telegram requesting help with federal law. Her crisp traveling dress and confident manner drew stares from curious townspeople. Ada met her at the depot personally. Rebecca's sharp eyes took in everything from Ada's fine clothing to the respectful way ranch hands tipped their hats. This wasn't the helpless victim her telegram had suggested. Miss Thornfield, Rebecca said with a firm handshake, your situation sounds fascinating. They rode back to the ranch in Ada's new carriage. Marcus had insisted she needed transportation befitting her status as a major landowner. The vehicle announced her prosperity to anyone watching. Tell me about these federal jurisdiction questions, Rebecca said, reviewing the documents Ada provided. Oil deposits cross state territorial lines. Water rights affect federal waterways. And my parents' murders involved mail fraud when they intercepted legal correspondence. Rebecca nodded approvingly. Excellent analysis. You've been studying law. Studying everything I can get my hands on. At the ranch, Rebecca met with old Pete to document his eyewitness testimony. Her legal training helped extract crucial details the old man had forgotten or dismissed as unimportant. The judge was carrying official papers that night, Pete remembered under careful questioning. Big envelope with wax seals. Probably forged property transfer documents, Rebecca concluded. They planned to claim your father sold the ranch before his death. Marcus had been busy gathering additional evidence. Bank records showed suspicious cash deposits into Judge Morse's account shortly after the fire. Sheriff Reynolds had purchased new property with no documented income source. Financial crimes create paper trails, Rebecca explained. Much easier to prove than violent acts. Ada spent her evenings learning legal procedures and territorial law. Rebecca proved an excellent teacher, helping her understand how federal courts work differently from local corruption. Knowledge is power, Rebecca reminded her, especially for women who can't rely on physical strength or political connections. 2 weeks into Rebecca's stay, Federal Marshal Thompson arrived unannounced. The grizzled lawman had ridden hard from the territorial capital after receiving Ada's formal complaint. Serious charges you're making, Miss Thornfield, he said, reviewing their evidence. Murder, fraud, mail tampering, official corruption. Serious crimes require serious investigation, Ada replied calmly. Marshal Thompson was impressed by the organized documentation. Rebecca had helped present everything with legal precision. Witness statements, financial records, and physical evidence created a compelling case. This goes way beyond local jurisdiction, he agreed. Federal courts will handle prosecution. The marshal established his investigation headquarters at the ranch. His presence sent shockwaves through Riverton's power structure. Federal law enforcement couldn't be bought or intimidated like local officials. Judge Morse arrived the next morning with Sheriff Reynolds and 4 armed deputies. They claimed to be serving eviction papers based on Ada's fraudulent ownership claims. Marshal Thompson met them at the ranch gate with federal authority. "This property is under federal protection pending criminal investigation," he announced. "Any interference constitutes obstruction of justice." Judge Morse's face went purple with rage. "You have no authority here, Marshal." "Want to test that theory in federal court?" The standoff lasted an hour. More townspeople gathered to watch the confrontation. Ada stood on her porch in full view, demonstrating that she wasn't hiding or running. Sheriff Reynolds finally backed down when the marshal threatened immediate arrest for interfering with federal investigation. The local officials retreated with their tails between their legs. Word spread quickly through the territory. Federal marshals investigating local corruption was big news. Newspaper reporters arrived from Denver and Cheyenne to cover the story. Ada found herself giving interviews to Eastern journalists, fascinated by the young heiress fighting establishment corruption. Her articulate responses and obvious intelligence surprised reporters expecting a simple victim story. "Education and determination can overcome any obstacle," she told the Denver Post. "My parents didn't die so their killers could profit from murder." The publicity created additional pressure on territorial authorities. Governor Hoyt sent representatives to observe the investigation personally. Political careers were at stake if federal corruption charges proved accurate. Rebecca helped Ada prepare for the formal hearing scheduled in territorial court. Her testimony would be crucial for establishing motive and opportunity for the conspiracy. "Remember," Rebecca coached, "stick to facts you can prove. Let the evidence speak louder than emotions." The night before the hearing, Maria found hidden papers in Harwick's old belongings. Letters between Judge Morse and unknown partners discussed eliminating the inheritance problem permanently. "They're talking about killing you," Maria whispered fearfully. Ada felt cold determination replace her earlier nervousness. The conspiracy was even deeper than she'd suspected. These men had killed her parents and planned to murder her too. Marshal Thompson reviewed the new evidence with grim satisfaction. "This seals the case. Premeditated murder plus conspiracy to commit additional murders. They're looking at federal prison or hanging." The morning of the hearing dawned clear and bright. Ada dressed in her finest clothes, looking every inch the successful businesswoman she'd become. Rebecca stood beside her as they entered the packed courthouse. Judge Morse sat at the defendant's table with expensive lawyers from Denver. Sheriff Reynolds looked nervous beside his legal counsel. Samuel Harwick appeared broken and defeated. Federal Judge Harrison presided over proceedings with stern authority. His reputation for fairness and incorruptibility had brought him from Washington specifically for this case. "The territory versus Morse, Reynolds, and Harwick," he announced. "Charges of murder, conspiracy, fraud, and official corruption." Ada took the witness stand with calm confidence. The scared servant girl was completely gone, replaced by a woman who understood her power and intended to use it for justice. The truth was finally going to emerge. Ada's testimony rang clear through the packed courthouse. She presented evidence methodically, her voice steady despite the weight of accusation. Judge Morse's expensive lawyers tried interrupting, but Federal Judge Harrison maintained strict order. "The financial records show payments coinciding with my parents' deaths," Ada stated, pointing to bank documents. "The pattern is undeniable." Old Pete took the stand next, his weathered hands shaking as he swore on the Bible. His eyewitness account of seeing Judge Morse and Sheriff Reynolds fleeing the fire scene created audible gasps from spectators. Rebecca presented the intercepted letters discussing the inheritance problem. The defendant's own words condemned them more powerfully than any outside testimony. Samuel Harwick broke first under cross-examination. His alcoholism and fear of prison loosened his tongue completely. "They told me to keep her ignorant," he sobbed. "Said if she ever learned the truth, we'd all hang for murder." Judge Morse's face went white as his co-conspirator confessed everything. The careful conspiracy of silence crumbled in minutes. Sheriff Reynolds tried claiming he was just following orders, but the evidence showed active participation in planning and execution. His deputy's horseshoe at the cattle poisoning scene linked him to ongoing sabotage. Judge Harrison deliberated for 2 hours before returning with his verdict: guilty on all charges. The defendants will face federal sentencing next month. The courthouse erupted in cheers and shocked murmurs. Ada felt justice washing over her like cool water after years in the desert. Outside, newspaper reporters surrounded her with questions about her plans. Ada spoke confidently about expanding the ranch and serving her community. "This victory belongs to everyone who believes in truth over corruption," she declared. Marshall Thompson shook her hand with genuine respect. "You've got more backbone than most men I know, Miss Thornfield." The ride back to the ranch felt like floating on clouds. Rebecca sat beside her, beaming with professional satisfaction at the legal victory. "You were magnificent in there," she said. "Calm, factual, and completely unshakable." Maria waited on the porch with James Lightfoot and the ranch hands. Their faces showed joy mixed with relief that the long nightmare had finally ended. "Justice for your parents," Maria said, embracing Ada warmly. That evening, they celebrated with a feast that brought together everyone who'd supported Ada through the ordeal. Ranch hands sat beside educated professionals. Mexican vaqueros shared tables with former slaves and white settlers. Gideon raised his glass in a toast to Ada Thornfield, who proved that courage and intelligence can defeat any conspiracy. The celebration continued late into the night with music and dancing. Ada felt truly happy for the first time since childhood. Her parents were avenged, her inheritance secured, and her future bright with possibility. 1 year later, Ada stood on her porch wearing an elegant blue dress that complemented her confident bearing. The ranch had prospered beyond everyone's expectations under her leadership. The oil discovery had generated enormous wealth, but Ada used it wisely. She'd built an integrated school that welcomed children of all backgrounds. Her employment practices provided fair wages regardless of race or nationality. James Lightfoot approached with reports from the horse training program they'd developed together. Their partnership had grown into something deeper over the months. "The territorial governor wants to meet with you again," he said, handing her an official letter. "Something about statehood discussions." Ada smiled as she read the invitation. Politicians who'd once dismissed her now sought her counsel on major decisions. "What do you think?" she asked James. "I think you should do whatever feels right. You've never steered us wrong." Their wedding was planned for next month. A union of equals who'd found love while building something greater than themselves. Maria emerged from the house with afternoon tea and business correspondence. The ranch now employed 43 people full-time, making it one of the territory's largest employers. "The Denver investors want to discuss expanding the oil operation," Maria reported. Ada reviewed the proposal carefully. Business decisions came naturally now after months of experience. She'd learned to balance profit with responsibility to her community. Marcus arrived with the weekly financial reports. The numbers continued exceeding projections month after month. "You're officially one of the wealthiest people in 3 territories," he announced cheerfully. Ada looked out over the vast property her parents had died protecting. Cattle grazed peacefully in green pastures. Workers moved between buildings with purposeful energy. Children played near the integrated school she'd built. This was the legacy Josiah and Lily Thornfield had envisioned. A place where love conquered hatred, where opportunity existed for everyone willing to work hard. Rebecca returned from her latest trip to Washington with news about women's suffrage progress. Her legal expertise had opened doors throughout the territorial government. "The governor wants your opinion on the new Constitution," she said. "Your influence carries real weight now." Ada touched the slight swell of her belly where her first child grew. The next generation of Thornfields would inherit a world slightly better than the one she'd been born into. "Mama always said this land would provide for those who loved it right," she said softly. "I reckon it's my turn to love it right." The sun set over Thornfield Ranch, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Ada Thornfield had transformed from dismissed servant girl to respected leader who changed her entire community. Her journey from humiliation to triumph proved that courage, intelligence, and moral authority could overcome any injustice. The scared girl sold to pay debts had become a woman who rewrote the rules for everyone.